The pregnancy test trembled in Emma Blackwood's hands as she stared at the 2 pink lines that would change her entire future. Sitting in the small bathroom of her apartment in Providence, Rhode Island, she tried to control her breathing as tears blurred her vision. The clock on the wall read 6:47 a.m., and the sound of the city waking up seemed distant, as if she were submerged in water. Pregnant, she whispered to herself, the word sounding strange on her lips. At 26, Emma had always imagined that this moment would be different. There would be smiles, hugs, maybe even champagne. Instead, she was alone, sitting on the cold tile, with a feeling of heaviness in her stomach that had nothing to do with morning sickness. The apartment around her seemed smaller than ever, suffocating with the memories of the last 8 months with Maxwell. The photos were still on the living room wall, silent witnesses to a happiness that now seemed to have been just an illusion. Emma stood up, her legs trembling slightly, and walked to the kitchen. Breakfast lay untouched on the table, a cup of ginger tea that her mother always said was good for nausea. Her phone vibrated on the worktop, and Maxwell's name flashed on the screen. Emma hesitated before answering, her heart racing. "Hello? Emma." His voice sounded distant, professional. "We need to talk about last night." Last night hung between them like a dark cloud. Emma had told him about her pregnancy over dinner, hoping, well, she didn't know exactly what she was expecting, but certainly not the reaction she received. Maxwell had been silent for long minutes before grabbing his coat and leaving without saying a word. "Max, she began, but he interrupted her. "I can't do that, Emma. Not now. My career is taking off. The firm is about to promote me to partner. A baby. That wasn't in the plans." The world seemed to slow down. Emma watched a drop of condensation drip down the side of her teacup as his words echoed in her mind. "On the plans? What about your plans for us to get married? Of building a life together? We were young when we talked about it. Dreamers. The reality is different, Emma. You know I can help financially, but don't ask me for more than that." The pain in her chest was physical, as if someone had ripped something vital out of her. "I don't want your money, Maxwell. I wanted..." Her voice faltered. "I wanted you to want it. That you wanted us." The silence on the other end of the line was deafening. When he spoke again, his voice was controlled, as if he were dictating a memo at work. "I'll transfer a monthly amount to your account. It's the best I can do." The call ended before Emma could answer. She stared at the muted phone in her hands, feeling the world crumble around her. The walls of the apartment seemed to close in on her, and the air became harder and harder to breathe. With trembling hands, she opened the laptop on the kitchen table. She needed a plan. She needed something, anything to get her out of there. Her eyes scrolled through the job ads until they stopped on one in particular. Full-time nanny wanted, accommodation included, experience with children required, location, Newport, Rhode Island. Emma had worked with children throughout college at a local daycare center. Her hands hovered over the keyboard as she considered her options. The apartment was Maxwell's. She would need to leave anyway. Her current job as an administrative assistant barely paid the bills, and with a baby on the way. Before she could change her mind, she started typing her response to the ad. As she wrote, her hands became steadier, her breathing more controlled. Through the kitchen window, the morning sun began to tint the sky with golden hues, and Emma felt something she hadn't expected to feel: hope. Her hand rested gently on her still flat stomach. "It's going to be okay," she murmured, both to herself and to the little life growing inside her. "We'll find our place in the world." The sound of footsteps in the hallway made her straighten up. Soon her neighbors would begin their daily routine, oblivious to the fact that in that small apartment, a life was being completely redefined. Emma finished writing her application and, after a final review, clicked send. The computer screen flashed with the confirmation of submission, and Emma closed her eyes, letting out a long, shaky sigh. She didn't know what awaited her in Newport, but she knew she couldn't stay there, surrounded by memories of empty promises and shattered dreams. She got up and began to collect her things, putting them in a suitcase. Each object she packed seemed to carry the weight of a decision that would change not only her life, but her son's too. In a few hours, her sister would arrive to help her with the move, and a new page in her story would begin to be written. One step at a time, she told herself, and for the first time that morning, her voice didn't shake. The cab snaked along Newport's coastal road, leaving behind the historic mansions that made the city famous. Emma watched the scenery through the window blurred by the October drizzle, her fingers drumming nervously on her handbag. The driver, a gray-haired gentleman, occasionally cast worried glances in the rearview mirror, probably noticing her pallor. "First time on Beacon Hill?" he asked, breaking the silence. "Yes," Emma replied, trying to smile. "It's so isolated." "Oh, you must be going to the Thorne house," the driver commented, his eyes meeting hers in the mirror. "The glass mansion, as we call it around here. Roman Thorne is a good man, even after—" Well, the driver didn't complete the sentence, but Emma knew the ending. During her research into the family, she had found out about the accident that took Olivia Thorne's life 2 years ago. The local newspapers had covered the tragedy extensively. The young wife of one of the East Coast's most promising architects, killed in a car crash during a storm. The car made one last turn, and Emma felt her breathing fail. The mansion loomed in front of them, an impressive structure of glass and steel that seemed to emerge organically from the cliff. The glass walls reflected the cloudy sky, creating an illusion that the house floated between the sea and the clouds. "We're here," announced the driver, stopping in front of an elegant gate. Emma paid the fare with trembling hands and got out of the car, clutching her only suitcase. The sea wind whipped her coat, bringing with it the smell of salt and impending rain. He approached the intercom and, after a moment's hesitation, pressed the button. "Thorne residence," a female voice answered. "Emma Blackwood. I'm the new nanny." The gate slid silently open, and Emma began to walk up the circular driveway of the estate. The garden was a controlled mix of wilderness and modern design. Perfectly pruned shrubs contrasted with wildflowers that danced in the wind. At the front door, a middle-aged woman was waiting for her. "I'm Margaret, the housekeeper," she introduced herself with a warm smile. "Welcome to Thorne Manor." The inside of the house was even more impressive than the outside. The double-height ceiling of the main entrance created a feeling of spaciousness, while dark wood paneling offered a welcoming contrast to the glass walls. The decor was minimalist, but Emma noticed little touches that revealed the presence of a child. A colorful drawing stuck to the fridge, a small pair of pink wellies in the hall. "Mr. Thorne is in his office," Margaret explained as she led Emma through the house. "Clara's in the playroom." Normally she'd be introduced first, but a sound of breaking glass interrupted Margaret, followed by a childish scream. Emma reacted instinctively, running towards the sound before Margaret could even move. In the playroom, she found a small girl sitting on the floor, surrounded by shards of glass. Clara Thorne was a perfect miniature of her father, with the same dark hair and deep blue eyes that Emma had seen in the photos. Silent tears streamed down her face as she stared at a broken picture frame. "Hey," Emma said softly, approaching carefully. "Are you hurt?" Clara shook her head negatively, still focused on the photo among the shards of glass. Emma knelt down beside her, noticing that the picture showed a beautiful golden-haired woman holding a younger Clara, both smiling for the camera. "I just wanted to get a closer look at her," Clara whispered. "Dad holds all the photos of her so high." "Clara!" Roman Thorne's deep voice filled the room. Emma turned to find him standing in the doorway, his tall figure casting a shadow over them. His eyes, the same intense blue as his daughter's, moved quickly from the scene to Emma. "Who are you?" "Emma Blackwood, sir. The new nanny." She stood up, conscious of her appearance after the trip. "Sorry to intrude. I heard the noise and Margaret should have taken you straight to my office," he interrupted, his voice controlled but tense. He approached Clara, taking her in his arms with a gentleness that contrasted with his rigid posture. "Is everything all right, princess?" Clara buried her face in her father's neck, her small hands clutching his shirt. "I'm sorry, Daddy. I just wanted to see Mom." Something flashed across Roman's face. Pain, guilt, love, so fast that Emma almost missed it. He kissed his daughter's forehead before handing her over to Margaret, who had just arrived with a broom. "Please take Clara to get cleaned up," he instructed. "Miss Blackwood, escort me to my office." Emma followed him in silence, feeling the weight of his appraising gaze. The office was a perfect reflection of its owner, organized, elegant, and a little intimidating. Roman gestured for her to sit in one of the leather chairs in front of his desk. "Your references are excellent," he began, leafing through a folder. "But I need to be clear. Clara is sensitive. What happened today?" "Mr. Thorne," Emma interrupted him gently, surprising herself with her boldness. Your daughter isn't just being sensitive, she's grieving, and as far as I can tell, she doesn't have the space to express it." The silence that followed was heavy. Roman studied her for a long moment, his fingers drumming lightly on the table. Finally, he spoke. "You're right, and that's exactly why you're hired." Emma blinked in surprise. "Excuse me? Clara needs someone to really see her, not just look after her," he explained, his voice softening slightly. "Your references say you're qualified. What I've just witnessed shows me that you're capable of understanding my daughter. The room is ready. Margaret will show you your assignments, and..." He hesitated briefly. "I appreciate your honesty." When Emma left the office a few minutes later, her head was spinning with information about schedules, routines, and responsibilities. But it was Clara's gaze, so full of longing and loneliness, that occupied her thoughts. Unconsciously, her hand rested on her belly, and she made a silent promise both to her own child and to the little girl she had just met. She would do her best to bring light back into that glass house. The first week at Thorn Manor passed like a hazy dream. Emma woke up before sunrise, still adapting to her new surroundings and the changes in her body. Her mornings began with bouts of nausea that she tried to hide, followed by long minutes watching the ocean through the glass walls of her third-floor bedroom. On that particular morning, while organizing Clara's breakfast, Emma noticed that some patterns had already established themselves. Roman always left early for his office in Newport after a quiet breakfast with his daughter. Clara, for her part, had developed the habit of watching her father drive off, her small face pressed against the living room window until the car disappeared around the bend in the road. "He always comes back," Emma said softly, approaching the girl. Clara didn't turn around, her fingers tracing invisible patterns on the glass. "Mom always came back too." The comment hit Emma like a punch in the gut. She knelt down next to Clara, ignoring the dizziness that came over her at the sudden movement. "Do you want to tell me about her?" For a moment, she thought Clara wouldn't answer. Then the girl turned around, her blue eyes shining with restrained tears. "She used to sing to me every night. Dad doesn't sing anymore." "And what song did she sing?" "You Are My Sunshine," Clara whispered. "But I can't listen to it anymore. Dad took away all her CDs." Emma felt her heart squeeze. Gently, she took Clara's hand. "How about we do something special today? Something your mother liked to do with you?" Clara's eyes widened. "Can we make cookies? Mom and I always made cookies on Thursdays." "Of course we can," Emma smiled, getting up. "But first, we need to take care of your preschool homework." The morning went smoothly. Emma helped Clara with her literacy exercises, noting how extraordinarily intelligent the girl was for her age. After lunch, they ventured into the spacious kitchen, where Margaret occasionally cast worried glances in their direction. "Miss Blackwood," the housekeeper called out at one point, "are you sure you're feeling all right? You look a little pale." Emma forced a smile as she helped Clara measure the flour. "I'm fine, Margaret. Just adjusting to the sea air." The truth was that the aromas of the kitchen were testing their limits, but Clara's joy was worth every wave of nausea. The little girl hummed softly as she mixed the ingredients, completely absorbed in her task. "Mom always put extra chocolate chips in," Clara commented, her small hands covered in dough. "She used to say that love needs to be abundant." Emma felt her eyes water, quickly blaming the pregnancy hormones. "Your mother seemed very wise." "She was the best," Clara agreed, then frowned. "But I can't tell Dad that. It makes him sad." "Why do you think that?" "Because he always goes to his office when I talk about her, or he looks out of the window for a long time, as if she's out there somewhere." Emma was about to reply when she heard footsteps in the hallway. Roman appeared in the kitchen doorway, still in his impeccable suit, an expression of surprise on his face as he saw the scene before him. "Daddy!" Clara exclaimed. "You're back early. We're making cookies like Mom used to." The silence that followed was deafening. Emma watched the emotions pass across Roman's face. Shock, pain, something that could have been anger. For a terrible moment, she feared she had made an irreparable mistake. Then, to her surprise, Roman loosened his tie and took a step towards the counter. Can I help you?" Clara practically jumped for joy, scattering flour everywhere. "Yes, you can put the chocolate chips in. Mom always let you do that part." Emma watched Roman swallow dryly, his hands shaking slightly as he picked up the packet of chocolate chips. For a moment, father and daughter worked in silence, and Emma could almost see the memories hovering between them like flour in the air. She sang while she cooked, Roman said softly, almost as if he were talking to himself. Always out of tune, Clara laughed, a crystalline sound that seemed to light up the whole kitchen. And she danced. Remember, Dad? She used to make you dance too. A small smile appeared at the corner of Roman's lips, the first Emma had seen since her arrival. I remember, Princess. I remember everything. Emma started to move away discreetly, feeling that she was intruding on a private moment. But Roman surprised her again. Stay, he said, his gaze meeting hers. Please, help us finish this. The rest of the afternoon was spent between hushed laughter, whispered stories, and the sweet aroma of cookies baking. Emma noticed how much younger Roman looked when he smiled, how gentle his large hands were as he helped Clara, how his eyes occasionally wandered to memories that seemed less painful when shared. When the last batch of cookies came out of the oven, Clara was covered in flour and chocolate, her eyes shining with happiness. They looked just like Mom's. Almost the same, Roman corrected gently, tasting a cookie. Your mother used to add a little cinnamon. Next time we can try cinnamon, Emma suggested, then froze, realizing the implication of her words. But Roman just nodded, his eyes meeting hers over Clara's head. Yes, we can. That night, after Clara had been put to bed, Emma found a note on her door. Roman's elegant handwriting said only, "Thank you for today." She needed it. We needed it. Emma put the note away on her bedside table, her hand resting instinctively on her belly, which was beginning to show the first signs of pregnancy. For the first time since arriving at the mansion, she felt that maybe, just maybe, she had found not just a job, but a place where broken hearts could begin to heal. The end of October brought with it a violent storm off the coast of Newport. Emma woke up in the middle of the night to the deafening sound of thunder and the howling of the wind against the glass walls. Her digital clock read 2:47 a.m. when a high-pitched scream cut through the air, overlapping the sound of the rain. Without hesitating, she threw on her robe and ran into Clara's room. The girl was curled up on her bed, shivering, her hands covering her ears. The open curtains allowed lightning to illuminate the room in dramatic flashes, casting frightening shadows on the walls. "Clara," Emma called softly, approaching the bed. "It's all right, darling. It's just a storm." "No, no, no," Clara sobbed, shaking her head frantically. "It was a night like this. Mom, Mom." Emma's heart squeezed with the realization. Of course, Olivia's accident had happened during a similar storm. Before she could react, heavy footsteps sounded in the hallway, and Roman appeared in the doorway, his hair disheveled and expression alarmed. "Clara," he called, his voice hoarse with sleep. The girl raised her head at the sound of her father's voice, tears streaming down her pale face. "Daddy, make it stop. Please, make it stop." Roman crossed the room in 3 long strides, sitting down on the bed and pulling Clara onto his lap. Emma watched, feeling suddenly intruded upon, as he cradled her daughter gently. "Shh, Princess," he murmured. I'm here. A particularly loud clap of thunder shook the house, making Clara cling even tighter to her father. Emma noticed that Roman was also tense, his own fingers white from squeezing the fabric of his daughter's pajamas. Acting on instinct, Emma began to close the bedroom curtains, creating a barrier between them and the raging storm. Then she located the small star-shaped lampshade on the bedside table and switched it on, bathing the room in a soft, golden light. "How about a story?" she suggested softly. Clara sniffled, turning slightly, her face hidden in her father's chest. "What story?" "Well," Emma sat on the edge of the bed, aware of Roman's intense gaze on her. "When I was little, my grandmother used to tell me stories about a girl who could control the weather with her imagination." "Really?" Clara asked, her voice still shaky, but now tinged with curiosity. She turned storms into magical light shows, thunder into fairy music, and rain into dancing crystal curtains. As Emma continued the story, her soft, melodious voice creating a magical world, she noticed Clara gradually relaxing in her father's arms. Roman also seemed less tense, his shoulders drooping slightly as he listened. "How did she do that?" Clara asked, her eyes now heavy with sleep. "She would close her eyes," Emma explained, "and imagine that every raindrop was a little dancer. Every thunderclap was just the fairies beating their crystal drums." Emma's voice grew quieter as Clara finally fell asleep, her breathing softening. For a moment, No one moved, the only sound being the storm now muffled by the closed curtains. "You have a gift with her," Roman finally said, his voice low so as not to wake Clara. Emma blushed slightly. "She's a special child." "Yes, she is." Roman gently tucked Clara into bed, covering her with the blanket. "These storms, since the accident, you don't have to explain," Emma interrupted softly. Roman studied her for a moment, as if he wanted to say something more. Instead, he just nodded. "Thank you for being here tonight." Emma was about to reply when a sudden wave of nausea hit her. She stood up quickly, perhaps too quickly, because the room began to spin. "Miss Blackwood?" Roman's voice sounded worried. "Are you all right?" "Yes, She took a deep breath, trying to control her unease. "I need some air." She made it as far as the corridor before her legs gave out. Roman followed her, gently closing Clara's bedroom door behind him. "Are you ill?" he asked, his voice mixing concern and something that sounded suspicious. Emma leaned against the wall, aware that she needed to make a decision right now. The pregnancy was starting to become more obvious, and she knew she couldn't hide it for much longer. "Not exactly," she replied, finally finding the courage to face him. "Mr. Thorne, Roman, there's something I need to tell you." The dark corridor seemed to vibrate with tension as Emma gathered her words. A flash of lightning briefly illuminated the space, revealing the intense expression on Roman's face. "I'm pregnant," she finally said, her voice barely above a whisper. 4 months. I should have told you before I took the job, but I was desperate for an opportunity, a place to stay, and—" "Why aren't you with the child's father?" Roman interrupted, his voice neutral. Emma felt her cheeks burn with shame and anger. He's made it very clear that he wants no part of this. A heavy silence followed his confession. Emma could hear her own heart beating, waiting for the inevitable dismissal. To her surprise, Roman let out a long sigh. "Tomorrow we'll talk about the necessary adjustments," he finally said. "For now, you need to rest. And Emma," he hesitated, using her first name for the first time, "thank you for your honesty." As Emma went back to her room, the storm began to die down outside. Lying on her bed, one hand resting on her growing belly, she reflected on how some storms brought destruction, while others washed away the past and made way for new beginnings. Across the hall, unbeknownst to her, Roman Thorne lay awake, watching the rain through the glass walls, thinking about second chances and intertwined destinies. The revelation of Emma's pregnancy provoked subtle changes in the dynamics of the Thorne mansion. The first manifestation came in the form of an elaborate breakfast the next morning, prepared by Margaret, who was now watching her with worried, maternal eyes. "Vitamins," the housekeeper said, placing a glass of green juice next to Emma's plate. "And take this too." She slid a bottle of prenatal supplements across the table. Emma blinked in surprise. "How did you—" "Mr. Thorne informed me this morning," Margaret replied with a gentle smile. "And after raising 3 children, I recognized the signs." Before Emma could reply, Clara burst into the kitchen, her dark curls still mussed from sleep. "Emma, you promised we'd go to the garden today." "After breakfast, dear," Emma smiled, watching the girl settle into her usual chair. "And after we've combed that hair." Roman entered shortly afterwards, already impeccably dressed in his gray suit. His eyes met Emma's briefly before turning to some papers in his hands. "I have an important meeting today," he announced, accepting the cup of coffee Margaret offered him. "But I'd like to talk to you in my office before I leave, Miss Blackwood." Emma nodded, feeling her stomach contract with nervousness. "Of course, Mr. Thorne." Breakfast passed in relative silence, broken only by Clara's occasional excited comment about her plans for the garden. When they had finished, Roman stood up, gesturing discreetly for Emma to follow him. The office, with its glass walls and view of the ocean, seemed less intimidating in the morning light. Roman indicated one of the leather armchairs to Emma before sitting down at his desk. "First," he began, "I want to establish that your job is not at risk. In fact, your presence has been beneficial to Clara." Emma let out a sigh she didn't know she was holding in. "Thank you, Mr. Thorne. However," he continued, "we need to make some adjustments. Margaret will be accompanying you to a doctor's appointment this afternoon. I'll also reorganize your responsibilities to make sure you don't overexert yourself." "That's not necessary," Emma protested. "I can take care of everything." "It's not a suggestion, Miss Blackwood," Roman interrupted her firmly. "Consider it part of your employment contract." Before Emma could argue, a cheerful shout came from the garden. Through the glass walls, they could see Clara running between the flower beds, chasing a butterfly. "She smiles more now," Roman commented softly, his gaze fixed on his daughter. "Since you arrived." Emma felt something warm expand in her chest. "She's an extraordinary child." "Yes, she is." Roman hesitated, then added, "How are you feeling?" "With the pregnancy?" The question caught her off guard. "Well, most of the time the nausea is subsiding." Roman nodded, looking uncomfortable. "If you need anything." "Emma!" Clara's voice interrupted the moment. "Come and see, there's a bird's nest." "Go on," Roman said, a small smile playing on his lips. "She's waiting." Emma found Clara crouched under an ancient tree, her eyes shining with excitement. On the lowest branch, a small nest housed 3 bluish eggs. "They're baby birds," Clara whispered reverently. "Are they going to hatch soon?" "Yes," Emma replied, sitting down next to her on the grass. "And Mommy Bird will take care of them until they're ready to fly." Clara was silent for a moment, contemplative. "Emma?" "Yes, dear? Is it true that you have a baby in your tummy?" Emma froze, her heart racing. How did you know?" "I heard Margaret talking to Daddy." Clara turned to face her, her blue eyes serious. "Are you leaving when the baby is born?" "Oh, Clara." Emma pulled the girl close, feeling tears in her eyes. "No, darling, I'm not leaving. Promise. I promise." Clara smiled, then placed a small hand on Emma's belly. "Can I be your baby's friend?" Emma laughed softly, covering Clara's hand with her own. "Of course you can. In fact," she hesitated, then continued, "you can be like a big sister to him or her." Clara's eyes widened. "Really? I've never had a brother or sister before." "Well, now you will." The rest of the morning was spent in the garden, with Clara making elaborate plans for when the baby arrived. Emma watched her, amazed at how children could accept change so naturally. In the afternoon, as promised, Margaret accompanied her to the doctor. In the ultrasound room, Emma held back tears as she heard her baby's heartbeat for the first time. "Do you want to know the sex?" the doctor asked. Emma nodded, unable to speak. "It's a girl." That night, after Clara had gone to bed, Emma found a small package on her doorstep. Inside was a children's storybook, visibly old and well cared for. A note accompanied it. It was Olivia's. She used to read it to Clara every night. "Perhaps you could continue the tradition." Emma hugged the book to her chest, feeling the weight of trust that this gesture represented. Outside, the garden was silent in the moonlight, the little bird's nest protected in the shadows of the tree, holding its own promises of new life. In his room, Roman Thorne watched the stars through the glass walls, thinking of second chances, of nests broken and rebuilt, of how fate sometimes had curious ways of healing broken hearts. The beginning of November brought with it a biting cold and an unexpected visit. Emma was helping Clara with her homework in the library when Margaret appeared in the doorway, her normally serene face marked by concern. "Miss Blackwood," the housekeeper called softly. "There's someone asking for you in the hall." Emma frowned, confused. No one but her sister knew where she was, and Charlotte had called the night before to say she wouldn't be in until Christmas. "Who is it?" "A man. He says he's—" Margaret hesitated, casting a meaningful glance at Clara, who was engrossed in her math exercises. Maxwell Preston. The name hit Emma like a punch in the gut. Her hand instinctively went to her belly, now visibly prominent under the baggy sweater. "Clara, darling," she managed to say, keeping her voice steady. "Why don't you go and ask Margaret for a hot chocolate? You deserve a break." Clara looked up, smiling. "Can I put marshmallows in it?" "Of course you can," Margaret replied promptly, taking her cue. "Come on, little one." As soon as she was alone, Emma allowed herself a moment of panic. Her hands were shaking as she made her way to the main entrance, where Maxwell was waiting. He was exactly as she remembered. Tall, well-dressed, with that air of confidence that had once charmed her. "Emma," he said, taking a step towards her. "You look different." "What are you doing here, Maxwell?" she asked, keeping her distance. "How did you find me?" "Your sister," he replied, at least having the decency to look embarrassed. I needed to see you, to talk about us, about the baby." "There is no us," Emma replied, her voice trembling slightly. "You made that very clear 4 months ago." "I made a mistake." Maxwell took another step forward. "I was scared, confused. But now, His eyes traveled over Emma's belly. She's my daughter too. Now that it's convenient for you? Emma felt a familiar anger rise in her throat. After I've spent months building a new life. Emma, be reasonable. You're working as a nanny in a strange house. I can offer much more than that. We can be a family. It's not a strange house. A deep voice interrupted. And she's not alone. Roman was standing in the doorway of his office, his blue eyes fixed on Maxwell with an intensity that made the other man recoil instinctively. Mr. Thorne, Emma began, but he held up a hand, gently silencing her. I assume you're the child's father, Roman said, his voice dangerously calm as he approached. The same one who abandoned a pregnant woman without support or resources. Maxwell straightened his shoulders, trying to look taller. That's a private matter between Emma and me. Not when you invade my property to disturb her, Roman replied. Emma is part of this family now. If she doesn't wish you to be here, I suggest you respect that. The silence that followed was tense. Emma watched the emotions pass across Maxwell's face. Surprise, anger, and finally, something like defeat. Emma, he tried one last time. Please, go away, Maxwell, she said softly. I've made my decision. After Maxwell left, Emma felt her legs go weak. Roman held her gently by the elbow, guiding her to a nearby armchair. Are you all right? He asked, his voice now soft with concern. Yes, Emma took a deep breath, trying to control the tears that threatened to fall. Thank you for everything. Roman knelt down beside her, his eyes meeting hers. Emma, what I said is true. You and your daughter are part of this family now. Nothing will change that. Before Emma could reply, small footsteps sounded in the hallway, and Clara appeared carrying 2 steaming mugs. I've brought you some hot chocolate too, Emma, she announced proudly. Then, noticing the tense atmosphere, she frowned. Are you crying? They're tears of happiness, darling. Emma smiled, accepting the mug. Sometimes we get emotional when we realize how much we're loved. Clara climbed onto Emma's lap, careful with her growing belly. I love you, Emma, and I love the baby too. Roman watched the scene, something soft in his gaze. Clara, he called gently, why don't we show Emma the extra room next to hers? The one we were preparing. Clara's eyes sparkled. May I? It's a surprise. Emma looked between the two of them, confused. Roman smiled, that rare smile that completely transformed his face. We've been working on it for a few weeks, he explained. For the baby. The room was a revelation. The walls had been painted a soft shade of lavender, with little golden butterflies dancing near the ceiling. A white cradle occupied the center of the space, and a rocking chair was positioned near the window. Clara chose the butterflies, Roman explained softly. She said they would be like angels guarding the baby. Emma couldn't hold back the tears this time. Clara hugged her around the waist, while Roman placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. At that moment, watching the sunset through the glass walls, Emma understood that family wasn't just about blood ties. It was about people who chose to stay, who built safe nests for each other, who turned houses into homes. Outside, the last leaves of autumn danced in the wind, and somewhere in the garden, small birds were preparing to fly for the first time, protected by the love of their makeshift family. The first snow of December covered Newport like a silent blanket. Emma woke up to the room bathed in silver light and Clara jumping on her bed, her blue eyes sparkling with excitement. Emma, it's snowing, the girl exclaimed, her small icy hands touching Emma's face. Can we make a snowman, please? Emma sat up slowly, her 6-month belly now pronounced under her flannel pajamas. Of course we can, darling. But first, breakfast. In the kitchen, they found Margaret preparing pancakes with maple syrup, the sweet aroma filling the room. Roman was already in his usual place, but something about his posture seemed different this morning. Daddy's staying home today, Clara announced triumphantly, climbing into her chair. He promised to help with the snowman. Emma looked in surprise at Roman Barn, who nodded slightly. The office is closed because of the snow, he explained, although something in his eyes suggested that there was more to the story. Breakfast passed in a cheerful atmosphere, with Clara planning in detail how her snowman would be, the biggest in Newport. Emma noticed that Roman was looking at her more often than usual, as if to say something. After Clara had rushed off to dress appropriately for the snow, Roman snorted softly. Emma, before we join her, can we talk for a moment? Emma's heart raced slightly as she followed him into the office. Snow fell softly on the other side of the glass walls, creating an almost magical setting. "I got a call last night," Roman began, his voice controlled. "From Maxwell Preston's lawyer." Emma felt her stomach sink. "Oh, he's contesting paternity," Roman continued, his eyes fixed on hers. "He wants legal rights to the child." The world seemed to spin for a moment. Emma leaned on the nearest table, feeling the baby move, as if responding to her anguish. "He can't," she whispered. "He made it clear that he didn't want to." "Emma," Roman interrupted gently, stepping closer. "I'm not going to let that happen." She stared at him in surprise. "How?" "I hired the best family lawyers in Rhode Island," he explained. "And," he hesitated, running his hand through his hair in an unusually nervous gesture, "I have a proposition for you." Before he could continue, Clara burst into the office, fully dressed in her pink snow coat. "Let's go. The snow is waiting." Roman smiled softly. "Later," he murmured to Emma. "We'll talk later." The rest of the morning was spent in the snowy garden. Emma watched, sitting in a chair that Margaret had insisted on bringing out, as Roman and Clara worked on their snowman. It was the first time she had seen Roman so relaxed, laughing openly as he helped Clara put an old scarf on the doll. "He needs a family too," Clara declared, looking critically at her creation. "A family?" Roman asked, adjusting the scarf. "Yes, like us," Clara explained with the simple logic of children. "You, me, Emma and the baby." Emma felt her cheeks flush, but Roman just smiled, his gaze meeting hers for a moment before turning to his daughter. After lunch, Clara fell asleep on the sofa in the library, exhausted from her adventures in the snow. Emma covered her with a blanket and was about to leave when Roman gently touched her arm. "Now can we talk?" They returned to the office, where the afternoon sun created golden patterns on the snow through the glass walls. Roman looked nervous, something Emma rarely saw. "My proposal," he began, "is more personal than professional." Emma felt her heart race. "What do you mean?" "Marry me." The words hung in the air between them. Emma blinked, certain that she had misunderstood. "What?" "It's the most practical solution," Roman explained quickly, although something in his eyes betrayed a deeper emotion. "As my wife, you would have legal protection. Maxwell couldn't touch you or the baby." "Clara," he hesitated. "Clara already considers you family, and Roman," Emma interrupted gently, "you don't have to do this. I'm not just doing it out of obligation," he said, his voice lowering. "These last few months, you've brought life back to this house, Emma. For Clara, for me." Emma felt tears well up in her eyes. "But Olivia, I'll always love Olivia," Roman said softly. "She was my first love, Clara's mother." "But," he moved closer, taking Emma's hands in his, "I've learned that the heart can expand. It can love again, differently, but no less truly." "Daddy?" Clara's sleepy voice came from the door. "Why is Emma crying?" Roman didn't let go of Emma's hands as he turned to his daughter. "Clara, darling, what would you think if Emma officially became part of our family?" Clara's eyes widened. "You mean forever?" "Forever," Roman confirmed, his thumb gently caressing Emma's hand. Clara rushed to embrace them both, her small hands barely reaching around them. "Yes, yes, 1,000 times yes," Emma laughed through her tears, looking at Roman. "I guess that answers that for all of us." Outside, the snow continued to fall softly, covering the world in pure white, like a blank page waiting to be filled with new stories, new beginnings, new loves. And inside the glass mansion, 3 hearts, soon to be 4, beat in a new harmony, weaving together a melody of family, love, and redemption. The announcement of the wedding stirred Newport like a gale. Emma quickly discovered that being engaged to Roman Thorne meant being in the spotlight of local high society. The following weeks were a whirlwind of planning, with Margaret acting as a protective barrier against the constant stream of event planners, florists, and stylists. "It's a lot of pressure," Emma confessed one evening as she and Roman went over the guest list in her office. "All these people, we can do something smaller," Roman offered immediately, his hand finding hers on the table. "More intimate." Emma smiled gratefully. "No, it's fine, it's just..." She hesitated, stroking her almost 7-month belly. "Sometimes I wonder if they're talking about us. The timing." Roman frowned. "Emma, I heard 2 ladies at the market the other day," she continued, the words coming out before she could contain them. saying that you were only marrying me because of the baby, that it was too soon after Olivia. Roman stood up abruptly, walking over to the glass wall. The winter night turned the glass into a mirror, reflecting his tense expression. When Olivia died, he began, his voice low, I thought I'd never be able to feel anything again. I focused only on Clara, on maintaining our routine. I existed, but I didn't live. He turned to face her. Then you arrived. Emma felt her heart speed up under the intensity of his gaze. You arrived with your stories, your gentle smile, your quiet strength, Roman continued, coming back to her. And little by little, without my realizing it, you began to heal not only Clara, but me too. Roman, let me finish, he asked softly, kneeling down beside her. I'm not marrying you because of the baby, or out of any sense of obligation. I'm marrying you because, for the first time since I lost Olivia, I can imagine a future, a bright future, full of love and laughter, with you, Clara, and our new daughter. Emma couldn't hold back the tears that streamed down her cheeks. Damn pregnancy hormones. Emma, Clara's voice echoed down the corridor, breaking the moment. Emma, come see Green now. Roman laughed softly. I think someone's excited about the bridesmaid's dress. In Clara's room, they found the girl twirling around in a delicate aqua green dress, with Margaret adjusting the hem. Look, Emma, Clara exclaimed. It suits your eyes. Emma smiled, remembering how Clara had insisted that the wedding theme should be green like Emma's eyes. Daddy, you look lovely, darling, she said, sitting down on the bed as she watched Margaret work. When the baby comes, will she wear a dress like it? Clara asked, stopping her twirling. She'll be too small to wear dresses like that, Roman explained gently. But she'll be at the wedding, won't she? Clara insisted. Emma exchanged a look with Roman. The wedding was scheduled for 3 weeks from now, and although their doctor had assured them that everything was fine, the proximity to the delivery date made everyone a little nervous. Of course, Princess, Emma replied. She'll be right here. She stroked her belly, listening to everything and participating in her own way. That night, after Clara had gone to bed, Emma found Roman in the library. He was holding an old photo album, his face thoughtful. Are these pictures of Olivia? She asked softly, sitting down next to him. Roman nodded, carefully turning a page. I want you to see them, to get to know her, even if it's like this. Emma looked at the photographs. Olivia had been beautiful, with long golden hair and a radiant smile. There were pictures of her pregnant with Clara, wedding photos, everyday moments frozen in time. She seemed to light up every room, Roman commented softly. Like Clara, Emma observed. Yes, he smiled. Exactly like Clara. He closed the album gently. Olivia always said that love has the power to multiply, not divide. I think it's only now that I really understand what she meant. Emma felt the baby move and took Roman's hand, placing it on her belly. I think someone agrees. The moment was interrupted by a soft knock on the door. Margaret entered, carrying an envelope. Sorry to interrupt, she said, but this has just arrived for Miss Blackwood. It's from the lawyer. Emma accepted the envelope with trembling hands. Roman moved closer, his presence comforting at her side as she read the document. Maxwell, she swallowed. He's giving up all rights to the baby. That's good, isn't it? Roman asked softly. Yes, Emma whispered, the tears starting to fall. Yes, it's perfect. Roman pulled her into his arms, and Emma allowed herself to cry, not of sadness, but of relief, of gratitude, of love. Outside the library, Clara peered through the ajar door, smiling at the sight of her father and Emma embracing. In her bedroom, her aqua-green dress shone softly in the moonlight, a promise of new beginnings. And somewhere between the past and the future, between old memories and new promises, a family continued to form, proving that love truly had the power to multiply infinitely. The morning of the wedding dawned with a soft mist over Newport, enveloping the Thorne mansion in an ethereal glow. Emma woke to the sound of muffled laughter and movement in the hallway. Clara and Margaret were already in full swing, even at 7 in the morning. Emma, Clara burst into the room, still in her pajamas, her dark curls as tousled as ever. It's today. It's today. Emma smiled, sitting up carefully. Her 8-month belly looked even bigger this morning, and the baby was especially fussy. Yes, darling, it's today, she confirmed, making room for Clara to climb into bed. Margaret appeared in the doorway, carrying a breakfast tray. "Clara, let Emma eat first. We have a long day ahead of us." The next few hours were a whirlwind of preparations. Emma's room was transformed into a small beauty salon, with the makeup artist and hairdresser working away while Clara watched in fascination. "You look like a princess," the girl sighed, watching Emma try on the white flower tiara she would be wearing. The wedding dress had been specially designed to accommodate her advanced pregnancy, a flowing model in champagne silk with Venetian lace details. When Emma finally put it on, even Margaret let out an exclamation of surprise. "Oh dear," the housekeeper murmured, her eyes misty. "You look absolutely stunning." Emma turned to the mirror and almost didn't recognize the woman staring back at her. Her green eyes seemed brighter, her cheeks flushed naturally, and there was something in her expression, a mixture of happiness and serenity that she had never seen in herself before. A sudden movement in her stomach made her gasp. "Emma?" Clara asked, concerned. "Is the baby all right?" "Yes, darling." Emma smiled, stroking her belly. "Your little sister's just excited for the party too." Suddenly, a sharp pain made her hold her breath. Margaret immediately noticed her expression. "Emma?" The housekeeper approached quickly. "Is everything all right?" "Yes, I just—" Another contraction interrupted her. "Oh, no, not today." "What is it?" Clara asked, her eyes wide. Margaret was already in action, reaching for her phone. "Clara, darling, go and call your father." "But he can't see the bride before the wedding," Clara protested. "I think we're going to have to break that tradition," Emma said between controlled breaths. "Your sister has decided she wants to take part in the ceremony in a different way." The next few minutes were chaotic. Roman came running in, still adjusting his tie, his face pale with worry. "Emma?" he called out, entering the room without hesitation. "Sorry," she mumbled, trying to smile through another contraction. "I think we need to rethink today's schedule." Roman knelt down beside her, taking her hand. "The wedding can wait." "No," Emma said firmly, surprising everyone. "It can't. All the guests are already arriving, and she took a deep breath. "I want to marry you today." "Emma, the contractions are still spaced out," she explained. "The doctor is on her way. We can have a quick ceremony in the garden and then go to the hospital." Roman studied her for a long moment, then a slow smile spread across his face. "Always surprising, aren't you?" The ceremony was rearranged in record time. Instead of the original elaborate arrangement in the main hall, the guests were directed to the winter garden, where chairs were quickly arranged among the trees covered in lights. Emma insisted on keeping her traditional entrance, leaning on the arm of her father who had arrived the night before. When the music started, a soft version of "Can't Help Falling in Love," she began her walk down the makeshift corridor, stopping only once to breathe through a contraction. Roman was waiting for her under an arch of white flowers, his eyes shining with a mixture of love and concern. Clara was by his side, practically bouncing with excitement in her aqua-green dress. "Welcome to this unique ceremony," the celebrant began, an understanding smile on his face. "Let's keep things brief but meaningful." The vows were simple and to the point. Emma had to pause in the middle of hers to take a deep breath, causing nervous laughter in the audience. "Roman," she continued, her voice shaking slightly, "you showed me that love can be found in the most unexpected places. That family is something we build with daily choices, and that," another pause for breath, "that sometimes the best gifts come at unpredictable times." "Emma," Roman replied, his hands holding hers tightly, "you brought light back into our lives when we thought the darkness was permanent. You taught us that love has the power to heal, to transform, to create new beginnings. And today," he smiled, "you are proving once again how life is full of wonderful surprises." By the time the celebrant pronounced them man and wife, Emma was having contractions every 8 minutes. The kiss was brief but full of promise, interrupted by Clara, who could no longer contain her excitement. "Are we going to meet my little sister now?" she asked, jumping up and down around them. "Yes, princess," Roman laughed, helping Emma move towards the waiting car. "I think this is going to be a doubly special day." As they left the garden under a shower of petals, Emma looked back one last time. The glass mansion shone in the winter sun, the wedding lights still twinkling between the trees, like stars trapped in time. "Ready?" Roman asked softly, helping her into the car. Emma smiled, taking his hand. "For everything." And so, still in her wedding dress, Emma set off on her next adventure, surrounded by the love of her new family ready to add another chapter to her extraordinary story. The Newport Hospital had never seen a bride in labor before. Emma, still in her wedding dress, now carefully protected by a hospital gown, instantly became the center of attention in the maternity ward. "Definitely a memorable entrance," commented Dr. Chen, her obstetrician, as she examined Emma, "and it looks like your little one is really determined to join in the celebrations. You're already 6 centimeters dilated." Roman hadn't let go of Emma's hand since they arrived. His fingers intertwined with hers even as the contractions intensified. In the hallway, Margaret tried to keep Clara occupied, but the little girl insisted on peeking through the bedroom window every few minutes. "Daddy," she called out during one of these visits. "Is Emma going to be all right?" "Yes, princess," Roman replied, although Emma could feel the tension in his voice. "Your sister's just a bit rushed to meet us." A particularly strong contraction made Emma squeeze Roman's hand tightly. "Talk to me," she asked between gasping breaths. "Distract me." Roman leaned closer, his soft voice close to her ear. "Did you know that when you first arrived at the mansion, Clara told me something interesting?" "What?" Emma managed to ask, focusing on his voice. "She said you had fairy eyes." He smiled. "And that fairies bring magic back to sad places." Emma laughed, the sound turning into a groan as another contraction hit her. "Your daughter has always been very perceptive." "Our daughter," Roman corrected softly. "Just like this little one who's coming." The next few hours became a blur of pain, breathing and whispered promises. At midnight, exactly 12 hours after their wedding vows, Dr. Chen announced that it was time to push. "Roman," Emma called out, her face glistening with sweat. "I love you. I needed to say that before." "I love you too," he replied, kissing her forehead, "more than I ever thought possible to love again." The moment was interrupted by the next contraction, and Emma began to push. The room filled with encouraging voices. The medical team, Roman, and even Clara, who had managed to escape Margaret's surveillance and was peeking through the door. "I can see the head," Dr. Chen announced. "A little more, Emma." With one last Herculean effort, Emma felt her daughter slip away into the world. The loud, indignant cry that filled the room was the most beautiful sound she had ever heard. "She's perfect," Roman whispered, his voice laced with emotion as the nurse placed the little pink bundle on Emma's chest. The newborn had a surprising amount of dark hair, like Clara's, but when she briefly opened her eyes, Emma caught a glimpse of the same shade of green as her own. "Hello, little Hope," Emma murmured, touching her daughter's delicate little face. "Hope?" Roman asked softly. "Hope Olivia Thorne," Emma added, looking up at him. "If you agree." Roman's eyes filled with tears. "It's perfect. Can I see? Can I see?" Clara practically skipped into the room, followed by an apologetic Margaret. "Come and meet your sister, princess," Roman called, lifting Clara up so she could see better. "She's so tiny," Clara whispered, amazed. "And beautiful. Can I hold it?" With Roman's careful help, Clara sat down in a nearby armchair, and Hope was gently placed in her arms. The moment the two sisters met for the first time was captured by Margaret in a photo that would later occupy a prominent place in the mansion. "We're a complete family now," Clara declared with the wisdom befitting children. As the evening progressed, the visitors left one by one. Margaret took Clara home, promising to return in the morning with clean clothes for everyone. In the now silent room, Emma watched Roman nursing Hope. "What are you thinking about?" she asked softly. "About miracles," he replied, taking a seat on the edge of the bed. "About how life has mysterious ways of surprising us. A year ago, I could barely imagine a future. Now," he looked at Hope, then at Emma. "Now I have more happiness than I ever dreamed I deserved." "You deserve all the love in the world," Emma said, stroking his cheek. "We all deserve it." Hope wriggled in her arms, letting out a little sigh of contentment. Through the hospital window, the sky began to lighten with the first lights of dawn, promising a new day, a new beginning. Emma thought about her own journey, the tears shed in the bathroom of her old apartment, the fear and uncertainty that had led her to Thorne Manor, the small decisions and big moments that had brought her here. Every step, every choice, had been necessary to create this perfect moment. "Welcome to the world, Hope," she whispered, watching her daughter sleep in Roman's arms. "You're already much loved." And in the stillness of that morning, as Newport awoke to a new day, a newly formed family rested, united by love, trust, and the hope of all the wonderful moments yet to come. Spring arrived in Newport, bringing with it an explosion of color to the garden of the Thorne mansion. Hope was 4 months old, and her crystalline laughter echoed through the glass corridors, mingling with the songs of the birds that had returned to build their nests. Emma was sitting on the balcony, cradling hope as she watched Clara help Margaret plant new flowers. The little girl was already showing distinct traits of both parents, the Thorne's dark hair, but Emma's green eyes. And, as Roman often commented, she had inherited the stubbornness of both. Thoughtful? Roman's voice surprised her. He approached silently, still in his office suit, and leaned over to kiss her forehead. "Just grateful," Emma replied, smiling when he sat down next to her. "Sometimes I'm still surprised by all this." Roman took Hope in his arms, and the baby immediately grabbed his tie with her tiny hands. "Me too," he admitted, "especially on mornings like this." "Daddy!" Clara shouted from the garden, lifting something in her dirt-stained hands. "Look what we found," Roman laughed, getting up with Hope. "Shall we see what our head gardener has discovered?" Emma followed them into the garden, where Clara was proudly holding up a small green sapling. "It's a sapling that grew on its own," Margaret explained, smiling, "from the old oak tree. Can we plant it somewhere else?" Clara asked, her eyes shining with anticipation. "So it can grow big and strong like the mother tree?" Emma exchanged a meaningful glance with Roman. The century-old oak was where Olivia used to read stories to Clara, and where Emma now often sat with the girls on sunny afternoons. "I think that's a wonderful idea," Roman replied, his voice soft. "Where do you want to plant it?" Clara thought for a moment, then pointed to a space next to the swing Roman had recently installed. "Over there. That way, when Hope grows up, she can have a special tree too." The afternoon was dedicated to planting the small sapling. Clara insisted on doing most of the work, with Margaret patiently supervising. Roman held Hope, who watched everything with her big green eyes, occasionally squealing with delight. "Ready?" Clara finally declared, her hands and face smeared with dirt. "Now we need to give it a name." "A name for a tree?" Emma asked, amused. "Yes, the big tree is Olivia," Clara explained naturally, making everyone's heart squeeze a little. "This one could be," she frowned in concentration. "Hope Jr." Roman laughed, but Emma noticed the glint of tears in his eyes. "It's perfect, Princess." Later, after the girls were in bed, Emma found Roman in his study, looking at old photographs. "Is everything all right?" she asked softly, moving closer. "More than fine," he replied, pulling her onto his lap. "Just reflective. Clara has so much of her, the way she sees the world, how she finds magic in the simplest things. She'd be proud," Emma said, resting her head on his shoulder, "of the wonderful girl Clara is becoming, of how you've moved on without ever forgetting her." Roman kissed her temple softly. "Sometimes I wonder if she knew, if she somehow knew that you would come, that you would save us." "You saved me too," Emma reminded him, "when I needed it most." A soft cry through the baby monitor interrupted the moment. Emma tried to get up, but Roman held her back. "I will," he said, smiling. "Enjoy a few minutes of peace." Emma watched him leave, then approached the glass wall. The garden was bathed in moonlight, and she could see the small, newly planted seedling, already at home in its new spot. Like all of them, she thought with a smile. A noise at the door made her turn around. Clara was standing there in her unicorn pajamas, looking sleepy. "Can't sleep, darling?" Emma asked, opening her arms. Clara rushed into her embrace. "I had a dream about Mommy," she said softly. "Did you? Do you want to tell me?" She was smiling, Clara continued, her voice sleepy. "In the garden? By the new tree? She said she's happy, because now we have you and Hope." Emma felt her heart expand with love for this extraordinary child. "Your mother will always be looking after you, darling, for all of us." "I know," Clara yawned. "Can I sleep with you and Daddy tonight?" "Of course you can." When Roman returned with Hope, now calm in his arms, he found Emma and Clara asleep on the office sofa. Quietly, he took a blanket and covered them both, then sat down in the nearby armchair with Hope. Outside, the small sapling moved gently in the evening breeze, its young leaves glistening in the moonlight. Like its predecessor, it would grow strong and majestic, witnessing the years to come, the laughter that would echo, the stories that would be told under its shadow. And so, on a quiet spring evening, the Thorne mansion housed their family, No longer broken, no longer incomplete, but perfectly imperfect in its new configuration. A family built on old memories and new promises, on losses and encounters, on the love that has the power to heal all wounds and create new beginnings. Hope's first birthday dawned with a perfectly blue sky over Newport. The glass mansion was decorated with pink balloons and silver ribbons, a reflection of the hours Clara had spent decorating the night before, insisting that everything had to be magical for her little sister. Emma watched the final preparations for the party through the glass wall of the kitchen, Hope balanced on her hip, clapping her hands excitedly to the butterflies dancing in the garden. "Mom!" Clara rushed in, her green dress fluttering. "Margaret says the cupcakes are ready." "Good, darling," Emma smiled. "Why don't you go and see if your father needs any help with the tables?" In the garden, Roman was organizing a picnic area under the century-old oak tree. The small sapling that Clara had planted the previous spring, affectionately nicknamed Hope Jr., was already showing promising signs of growth next to it. "Baba!" Hope called out, stretching her arms towards her father as soon as she spotted him. "Someone's looking forward to your party," Emma commented, approaching Roman with her youngest daughter. Roman took Hope in his arms, spinning her in the air and causing a cascade of laughter. "I can't believe it's been a year," he said, pulling Emma close with his free arm. The year had passed like a dream. Hope had grown from a quiet newborn to a curious and determined baby who was already taking her first hesitant steps, holding onto the furniture. Clara had adapted to the role of big sister with a dedication that surprised everyone, always ready to read stories, sing lullabies, or simply make Hope laugh. The guests began to arrive in the early afternoon. Charlotte, Emma's sister, was one of the first, carrying a huge, poorly wrapped present. "Aunt Charlie," Clara ran to hug her. "Did you bring the present I suggested?" "Of course I did, little conspirator," Charlotte winked. "But it's a surprise." The party flowed naturally, with children running around the garden while the adults chatted in the shade of the trees. Hope, dressed in a delicate white dress with green details, Clara's choice of course, charmed everyone with her smiles and attempts at walking. "Cake time," Margaret finally announced, bringing out a cake decorated with tiny sugar butterflies. As everyone gathered around to sing happy birthday, Emma felt Roman squeeze her hand gently. She knew what he was thinking, how life could change so completely in such a short time, how love could grow and transform in unexpected ways. "Make a wish, Hope," Clara instructed cheerfully, helping her sister blow out the only candle. After the guests had left and the sun was beginning to set, the family gathered on the balcony. Hope had fallen asleep in Roman's arms, exhausted from the day's emotions. Clara was lying on Emma's lap, almost asleep too. "Mommy," Clara murmured sleepily. "Yes, darling. Do you think Mommy Olivia is happy today?" Emma exchanged a glance with Roman before answering. "I'm sure she is, love. She's always happy when you're happy. I dream about her sometimes," Clara continued. "She's always smiling. And now," she yawned, "now she doesn't seem sad in her dreams anymore." Roman leaned over to kiss Clara's forehead, then Hope's. "It's because she knows we're all right, princess. That we're happy, like a family," Clara murmured, finally giving in to sleep. Emma looked at her family, her husband holding their youngest daughter, her stepdaughter, who had long since become simply her child at heart, sleeping in his arms. The garden they had cultivated together, the house that had been transformed from a cold glass mansion into a home full of love and laughter. "You know," she said softly to Roman, "when I first came here, I was so scared. Pregnant? Alone? Not knowing what the future held. And now," he asked, his blue eyes meeting hers, "now I know I was just finding my way home." Roman smiled, that smile that still made her heart skip a beat. "To our house." In the garden, the last lights of the day danced across the glass walls, creating golden patterns that resembled butterfly wings. The gentle breeze swayed the branches of the century-old oak and its young companion, mixing their leaves in a silent dance. And so, as the sun set on Newport, the Thorne Mansion held its most precious treasures, not its glass walls or its elaborate gardens, but the hearts that beat within it, united by love, loss, hope, and the certainty that sometimes the happiest endings begin in the most unexpected moments. If you could write a letter to your past self at a time of great uncertainty, just as Emma faced when she discovered her pregnancy, what words of hope would you share? How does Emma's and the Thorns story resonate with your own moments of personal transformation? Leave your thoughts in the comments. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed the story, please subscribe to our channel and leave a comment below, letting us know what you thought. Your feedback and support mean a lot to us. Stay tuned for more exciting stories.